It's said that turnabout is fair play. Well, today it is a turnabout. I'm not asking the questions, I'm answering them. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Let's go.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We're here each week to talk about leadership, teamwork, organizational culture, and human potential with experts from every walk of life. Our goal is to help you become the remarkable leader and human being you were born to be. Your host is Kevin Eikenberry, a leadership thought leader, best-selling author, coach, trainer, and consultant to leaders for nearly 25 years. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's upcoming book, The Long Distance Leader, Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. Order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/book. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.
Welcome to episode 88 of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. It's a special episode. I'm about to tell you all about that because I am not the interviewer today. I'm the interviewee today, if that's the right way to say that. And so with me today is Lisa Ritter-McMahon, who is on our team. She is the producer of the show. If you're on our Facebook group, hint, 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 you've seen her posting there. And she's going to interview me today. And so what I'm going to do now is hand it over to Lisa, and I'm going to change roles. So Lisa, welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And for all of you out there, I'd like to welcome Kevin Eikenberry. Kevin is a recognized world expert on leadership development and learning and is the Chief Potential Officer of the Kevin Eikenberry Group. He has spent more than 25 years helping organizations across North America and leaders from around the world on leadership, learning, teams and teamwork, communication, and more. He was named by Inc.com as one of the top 100 leadership speakers and leadership management experts in the world, and has been included in many other lists. He is the author, co-author, or a contributing author to nearly 20 books, including Remarkable Leadership and the bestseller From Bud to Boss, Secrets of the Successful Transition to Remarkable Leadership. His next book is co-authored with Wayne Trammell, The Long Distance Leader, Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership, which will be released June 5th of 2018. So coming up in a few months here.
Yep.
His blog is consistently ranked among the world's best and most read on leadership. So Kevin, welcome.
I am glad to be here, Lisa. I've been looking, ever since we put this on the schedule, I've been looking forward to this.
Well, good.
Here's what's going to happen. What's going to happen is everyone's going to like, you better at this than me, and I'm going to lose the job. That's what's going to happen.
That's probably, or, hopefully people join our Facebook group and they'll be like, Lisa, we want to hear more from you. So
there you go.
So my first question's an easy one. And what's it feel like to be on the other side of the mic, having someone introducing you and asking you the questions?
Well, I've had the chance to be interviewed a lot and been on a lot of podcasts and that sort of thing. So I've the experience of having someone else talk about me, whether it's on a podcast or an interview or at a speaking engagement, is not new. But it is different to be here, Lisa, and on quote unquote my podcast to have someone else taking the lead. I can't think of anyone I'd rather have doing it. But yeah, it is a little different. It's kind of I'm looking forward to it.
Well, good. So let's go ahead and get started. And the reason why you are our guest this week on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, you've written some other books on leadership, and we've mentioned a few. Mm-hmm. And we talked about your new book that's coming out in June, The Long Distance Leader. So what made you focus on remote leadership this time?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. And from the perspective of the marketplace, the trend toward more and more folks working away from the rest of their team, that trend is not going away. There have been some big organizations that have sort of famously brought people back in, but even in those cases, they haven't brought everybody back in. That was, I think, in some cases, PR as much as anything. But even if some folks have done that, the world continues to change in the direction of more and more people working remotely. And so the job of being a leader, Lisa, is hard enough as it is, let alone when not everybody works in the same place. So from a marketplace perspective, we felt like this was a need, and that it's a need that we don't really think was being addressed effectively or yet. Maybe that's the best way to say it in a book. And then, from our business's perspective, we're in the business of helping leaders be more successful and productive and confident. And this whole remoteness component is an additional challenge for leaders. So it seemed like a logical thing for us, both from the marketplace and from our business. And as you know, Lisa, our business includes the Remote Leadership Institute. So it really was a good chance for us to think, to really start to codify a lot of what we've been teaching and talking about and writing about in one place in a book.
Okay. So we know, and we've seen it, and we've had other guests share with us, more remote working, getting out, not everybody in the same place, even coming down to travel a little bit, with businesses cutting back travel budgets and that sort of thing. A lot of people are even meeting remotely, whether they work together in the same organization or not.
Yep.
So, you talked a little bit about why you focused on remote leadership, but getting down into the book, what was the focus here? I mean, we know why we did remote, but what were we focusing on with this book?
Well, I think the book is about two things. It is really about the fact that leadership is leadership. So there's a good bit about this book, and a number of the people that have read parts of it already, Lisa, are saying, hey, this has got great leadership stuff for us in general, remote or not. But what we're really trying to do with this book is to say, hey, as a leader, most of what you need to do hasn't changed. And so there's part of this book that is about connecting the remoteness to the principles that most apply. So part of what we need to do as leaders, most of it doesn't change, but the nuance of the changes that have taken place are super important. So it's super important for us to be aware of and thinking about those changes a lot. So the book is really about what's changed and what hasn't, and how to put those two things in proper perspective and hopefully be really practical about both.
So you mentioned nuances of, leadership is leadership, but you mentioned there are nuances when you're leading remotely. Can you talk any more about some of those nuances?
I can, but I have to tell everyone who's listening or perhaps watching that this is sort of a surreal moment, because you see, Lisa works for me, and Lisa works remotely for me most of the time. She has an office down the hall. She's here about once a week. And so, I can talk about these things, and yet at the same time, I have a whole team of people that are saying, well, I don't know if he's really doing that stuff or not. So a little bit surreal, and hopefully she doesn't frown too much as, oh, he's not doing that one. He's not doing that one. But, I think there are some nuances that are critical to think about. And one of them is that, and probably the most obvious one, is that communication is different. Communication is harder. We really need to be using technology to mediate the communication in different ways than when everyone's up and down the hallway. So right now, the only other person in the office here is Marissa. She's down the hall. Her office is next to yours when you are here. And so I'm hopefully not going to send her very many emails today. I'm going to stop down and say hello. And I'm not saying I might not, or she might not get an instant message, but fundamentally, if we need to talk about something, we can be face to face, and we can have the richness of that kind of conversation. But when our teams are not all here, or they're not here all of the time, we got to figure out how we're going to communicate most effectively. And that doesn't necessarily just mean doing what we like or are comfortable with, but rather to be much more intentional. Lisa, I would say so communication is certainly one of those things. And if I were to say what's a big meta message of the book, a meta message of the book is, when you're not with your people every day, you have to be way more intentional about everything, about how you communicate and about what you communicate and about how often you communicate, as an example. I think another one of the nuances is that most remote leaders are dealing with what we would call a hybrid team. I just described it here. You're here part of the time. Marissa's here all of the time. Some people are pretty much never here. So we have a truly hybrid team. I mean, your relationship with Marissa is different because you see her a couple of times a week, and you can obviously have conversations about work-related and non-work-related stuff face-to-face. But with other people on the team, you don't have that chance. And lots of leaders are dealing with that hybrid team scenario where we've got people on both the people out and the people who are in, who have thoughts and beliefs about the other group, right? Like the people in the organization that are like it down the hall feel like they get all of the projects that they don't really want because
right.
hey, can you help me with this, right?
Yeah.
And the people out sometimes feel like they're left out, right? If we have a birthday celebration and, there's no cake for me because I'm, in my home office. And so like there's all sorts of, and those are just a couple examples of the challenges that are just going to naturally occur that we as leaders must work to recognize and overcome that we would never have had to think about before. I guess I'm just picking a couple of small examples, and I'll give you one more, and then I'll we can go wherever you want to go with any of this. Is that trust is so important for us in the workplace, for us to be more effective, to get more done faster, have higher productivity, as well as just having less stress at work. And building trust at a distance is harder. People don't always feel connected. They don't know each other as well. It's harder to grow trust. So we talk a lot in the book about how to deal with that, how to overcome some of that, and what we as leaders can do. Because this affects not only coworkers, but the trust that our team members have in us as the leader as well. So those are just a couple of things off the top of my head.
And you said a lot of good things, and it has my mind kind of thinking as we move on. So obviously I am part of one of these remote teams, or at least a hybrid. I have the opportunity to see you in the office, and looking out there and maybe some of the groups you've worked with, you have the experience of leading a remote team, which I think, puts you kind of at an upper echelon for being more of an expert to write a book on remote leadership because you've been doing it.
Well, I hope so. I think that's one of the things that hopefully will make this book a better book, a more relevant book, is that not only have I been teaching leaders for a long time and working with leaders for a long time, and not only have we been doing all of the pieces related to remote, through our Remote Leadership Institute, remoteleadershipinstitute.com, where we have all sorts of programming to help leaders in these situations. But I also, as you said, I'm doing this every day. Hopefully I'm learning something. Hopefully I'm getting better at it. So I do believe that it makes a better book. And as you said at the opening, the book isn't just mine. I'm co-authoring with Wayne Trammell, who's on our team, one of your coworkers, and Wayne works fully remotely. So
yes.
we have both sides of that part of the equation too, which I think makes for a very interesting, hopefully a more valuable perspective for the book.
So in writing this book, and clearly you mentioned before, you and Wayne saw a need for it. You see what's going on. You see teams that, for a variety of reasons, are working more remotely. So my question is, when you started writing this book, what was one of the biggest challenges that, I guess in the beginning, and maybe still today, when people call you or call Wayne and say, hey, we're working remotely, here's what we have. What are one of the biggest challenges that you've seen maybe emerge to the top of the questions people are asking?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it is about communication and technology, and how do we use the technology. We talk about the technology in the book, but the book is not going to become dated as the technologies change, right? So on our team, we use all sorts of technologies. You and I are using one today. We've got like 5 ways that we can have a web conversation, a web camera conversation you and I could have. And so there's a whole piece of technology, and we do a lot of work with organizations about that. But I think one of the challenges is people have shown up, people have ended up at this place, and they've never really thought about it. So the challenges start to mount as a bunch of little things that at the end they say, you know what, this really is different, and we're not quite sure we've got it all figured out, but we've been moving in this direction for a long time, right? If we look at the sort of the the history of business in the US or in the world, sales teams there've been sales teams leading remotely for a long time. And here's one of the differences. Generally speaking, on a sales team, those folks are out there, hunting on their own. And yes, they're a part of a team, and quite honestly, they could probably get a lot better if they learn some of the stuff we're talking about here. But fundamentally, those salespeople are out there on their own doing the sales thing. But now what's happening is all of these teams that are remote, they're expected to be fully integrated members of teams. They're not out doing their own thing. And one of the things that the research tells us, Lisa, is that people working remotely, working at home, can be very productive because there's fewer interruptions. Right?
There is.
You know that.
I know. I've got a quiet house right now.
So, and yet what often happens is when people are working remote, they're very productive on their stuff, but they're not very good. They become very insular. And so people become very much sort of like that salesperson. Like, I'm out there doing my thing and they're not connected to the larger piece. So I think what's happened, Lisa, in many cases is that people are figuring out the challenge after they've gotten into this. And like, things just aren't quite the way we need them to be. They can't even always quite put their hand on what it is. So we definitely get the challenges around the technology and around the communication specifically. We definitely get questions about how to build a team remotely, specifically around that. We get questions about how do I coach and mentor my team from a distance? How do I know what they're working on? All of that sort of stuff. There's lots of things that show up, but I think the biggest phenomenon is a lot of times people have been at it a long time before they sort of figure out like, oh yeah, this isn't really quite working right, or the way we'd like as well as we'd like it to.
Well, and I always tell my boys when they don't want to go to practice, like, you know what, we can always get better. It doesn't matter how many games you won or lost or what happened. We can always get better. And so even teams that have been doing this a while, I think you said it, there's always ways to get better. There's always ways to look at something differently and get better. So
I couldn't have said it better myself, Lisa.
Yeah. Now, hopefully the people out there listen to me more than my kids do, because
well, for all of you, so you all know, her kids are in elementary school. So
yes,
everyone else can share the laugh that you and I are having.
Yes. Anyone who's got 11 and 7-year-olds out there who know that really I know absolutely nothing. And quick aside, we had our first e-learning day yesterday. And it's a wonder that I even have a job, because trying to help them with their schoolwork, I knew absolutely nothing. I did not know what I was doing. So I thank teachers out there everywhere for putting up with that every day.
There you go.
So to get back on track, we've talked about a lot of things, and we know this book isn't going to be released until June. And we know that this episode will be released prior to that.
It will.
So to kind of tease some, a little teaser, but to give people something to go on, what are some immediate takeaways that someone listening right now that's either part of a remote team thinking about going that way, leading, what is a takeaway they can use right now before the book comes out to get started?
So a couple things. First of all, yeah, and they ought to go pre-order the book. So remoteleadershipinstitute.com/pre-order. You can pre-order your copy. And if you go there, we actually have some special content for you there. And don't worry, if you're watching this, listening to this after June, that link will still work. So it won't be a pre-order then, you'll be able to get your book. But I think there are some things. Lisa, that's a great question. I think there's several things that I would encourage people to do. One is think about being more intentional about your communication with your team members, especially those who are remote. Have a conversation with each of them about, hey, how's it working? What could I be doing differently or better so that you feel more connected, so that you're getting the support that you need from me? I would take that as one very specific thing that you could go out and do. Go ask your team what you could do, or how we, the two of us, could communicate more effectively and better, because that's one of the challenges that we face. The second thing that I would encourage you to do is to get clearer about how we're going to use various technologies. So you've got some sort of web conferencing tool that you probably have that you may not know how to use very well. So Lisa, you said earlier about team meetings, and we continue to figure out how to make our team meetings better. But think about how you can use the tools that you've got way more effectively. They can do most anything you want them to do to help those meetings be more effective. And in fact, you could argue in some ways meetings may actually be more effective. Some kinds of meetings might be more effective done well using the technology than if we're all in the same room. So I think those are two things. We could have a long list, but those are two places to start. Think about your technology. How can we use our technology better to get better results? Go out to your team and individually and talk to them about how can we have a better communication process between us moving forward. And it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. So Lisa, on our team, it's not the same. How I'm doing that and what that communication rhythm looks like isn't the same with every team member. And I think that's okay. That makes the leader's job harder but it allows us, I think, to adapt to the needs and styles of the members of the team.
Right. Which at the end of the day, I think is going to get you to where you want to go a little bit quicker.
I hope so.
Okay. So for those of you who have listened in the past, you know that Kevin has a little game he plays called Experts Say. And what's fun is we're going to play this game today, and he has no idea what the words I am going to throw out at him. So for those of you that don't know, this is your first episode, welcome. What I've done is I've kind of picked a couple of words, and I'm going to throw them to Kevin, and he's going to give me first thing that comes to his mind when he hears these words. So are you ready to go?
I'm ready. I'm sitting down. I'm ready.
All right. First word, teams.
Teams, a critical part of our work. We really don't accomplish anything on our own. And I think that how we think about teams can both help us and get in our way. I think that sometimes we try to act like every team's a basketball team where everybody needs to be able to do everything. I don't think that's always the case. Not every team needs to be interdependent like that. But I think that we have to, too many organizations, they say they've got teams and all they've got are groups. Just because people sit near each other or come together in a meeting doesn't mean they're a team. And so there's a lot more I could say, but that's not the goal of this exercise.
No, it isn't. Maybe we need to have a whole separate discussion on teams, or maybe Kevin will expound to that.
You're just trying to take my job. Okay.
All right. You know what? Maybe Kevin will put on the Facebook group a little bit more of teams. And I think that's a good question. The difference between a group and a team, because I do think, and I've been places where you have a group of people together, and are they a team? We're calling them a team, but are they truly? So I think that's a good a difference that I don't know we always think about. All right. Next one, communication.
Communication, it's the cornerstone of our work as a leader. In the new book, we talk about a 3O model of leadership. And the first two O's are outcomes and others. That as leaders, it's about the outcomes we're trying to reach and the others involved in helping to reach them. The third O is ourselves. And communication plays to all three of those. The outcomes need to be mutually clear. Everyone has to be able to effectively communicate, and there's a role that we play both in what we communicate and how we communicate it and when we communicate it. And as we've said a little bit, that's more complicated or complex when we're doing it remotely. I do not believe that you can be an effective leader if you can't be an effective communicator. It's one of the things that, it's not the only one, but it's one of the core competencies that, like, if you can't communicate your way out of a paper bag, I often tell people, you probably can't lead. People aren't going to choose to follow, right? So we can always get better at it. In organizations, everywhere you go, people say, well, we need better communication. So it's an aspirational thing. But I think that it's, for us as leaders, we've got to always be on the path of working at being better at it.
Okay. So I think sort of tied into communication, the next word I'm going to give you is engagement.
Well, there's a word that's being used so much as a buzzword that it's almost becoming a cliche, which is truly unfortunate because it's super important. How's that for a technical term? It's super important for organizations.
Super duper important.
Super duper important. It really is. Here's the thing, but I think the reason it's becoming cliche is it's so important that people start lumping a lot of stuff into it. But here's the thing, at some level, we want our folks as a leader, speaking as a leader now, we want our folks to feel like the work that they do matters, that it makes a difference, that it's meaningful, and they feel committed to it. They feel a sense of ownership to the work, not only of their work, but the organization. If those things are true, you have engagement. So engagement has become sort of this umbrella idea that's super important, that touches on things like, it touches on, Lisa, a lot of things that have been talked about on episodes of the podcast. We've had people on where we talked specifically about engagement, but we've talked a lot about culture. We've talked a lot about a variety of other subjects, that accountability with Nate Regier as one example. And all those things come back together toward this idea of engagement. And so my hope is that the next time you hear that word, you don't roll your eyes, but rather you say, yeah, it really is important. And don't get sort of lost in, buzzword bingo. There it is again. There's engagement.
There's engagement. Yeah. All right. Last one, remote working.
It's the future. It is the future. I think that, we've been talking about it for the whole episode. The trend is not going to go the other direction. Technology allows it. The flexibility and adaptability of the workplace demands it. As more and more people are working part-time jobs in the gig economy, if you want to use that phrase, that's contributing to it. So working remotely and getting better at leading others, being a part of a team remotely, and knowing how to manage yourself and work alone are all they're important skills for the future.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you, Kevin. So we've just spent some time talking about really remote leadership. I think we focused a lot on leadership in general, and then kind of how you move that into when you don't have your team together, when people are kind of spread out. So what do you do for fun? I know you don't sit in that office all the time.
Well, I sit in this office. Well, when I'm not traveling, I sit in this office a lot.
I know, but you don't sit there all the time.
I love to read, and it's a great bonus to do this podcast because, it's a bonus and it's a blessing and a curse. So I get the chance to read a lot of really great stuff in preparation for these conversations, and not in every case have I finished the book. So sometimes then I really want to go finish it after I talk to folks. And so I love to read. So that's something I do for fun. The curse is that every week people are saying other good stuff they've read. And so my list gets longer. And Lisa could tell you all about what my office looks like and how many books are here. They're not even all here.
If we pan the camera around, we won't do that.
You can actually pan it today, and the desk is pretty clean, Lisa. Just
okay. All right.
But the other thing that I do, the unusual thing that I do for fun, is that I grew up on a farm, as some of you probably know, and I'm a collector of antique tractors, so I like to spend. I've spent a lot of time learning about the history of the tractor industry, and I do have a collection of real life, full size tractors ranging from 1939 to I don't know if I'll count that one, to 1964. And so it's something that I love to do. They're not here in Indianapolis, they're at our farm in Michigan, but it's also something I do. I've got some friends that we go to a couple of auctions a year, and it's a part of my kidhood. It's become a part of my adulthood.
Interesting. Wonder how many people out there are going to share their love of tractors with you now that they've heard that.
Well, it's so interesting, Lisa, because I talk about it in workshops and I use it in a story, and it's interesting. I bet there's not a week that goes by that I don't get an email from someone that says, I saw this tractor in a field, and I saw this ad, and I get emails with people send me Craigslist ads. I get all kinds of stuff, and I love that. So if you are a collector or whatever, and I've talked about this on a couple episodes, I think, Lisa, over time, it's one of the odd things about Kevin.
Okay.
Just leave it at that. That's true.
Well, now I want to ask you, is there a tractor out there that you're looking to add to the collection?
Yeah, the next tractor I really want to own is a John Deere 3010 diesel. That would be what's next on my list.
Got it. Okay, so you mentioned one of the things you enjoy doing is reading, and what are some books that you're currently reading right now?
Well, I came prepared. I brought the book from home that I was reading last night. It's called Memory Rescue by Daniel Amen. I think it's Amen. It may not be Amen. So if you're watching us, you can see it. But the book is called Memory Rescue, and it's dense, and it's I'll tell you this: if you have Alzheimer's or memory loss in your family history, or if you're just sort of freaked out about that or worried about it in general, this guy, this MD, and his organization is at the forefront of understanding all of that. The book talks a lot about things that we can do, not only to lower the chances that happens to us, but also there's some really interesting stuff that they're talking about how they can actually reverse a lot of the stuff. It's really, really interesting. It's dense, it's thick, it makes me feel guilty in some cases, like what you should eat and shouldn't eat. But here's the I mean, I'm only partway through, but I will say this: the interesting thing is some stuff that we ought to be doing anyway really helps our brain too, like exercise. The biggest user of oxygen, blood flow, is in our brain. So anything we're doing that improves all that is actually helping our brain. So that's good news. But it's a fascinating book. If the book is a lead gen to get people to want to go to his clinics, it's working for me, because the further I read, the more I'm thinking maybe I should go get a full workup from his organization. But I really liking it so far, but it's pretty dense, and
Okay.
you can't, you're not going to sit and read it straight through. That'd be my sense.
Okay. So maybe not something sitting by the pool when you just want to
relax.
relax.
Pool or beach book. I do not believe.
Okay.
I do not believe.
That's okay. For most of the country, we've got another good couple months of some cold weather. So, that's probably a good book to knock out a couple of pages a night when it's too cold and too dark to go outside and do anything else.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So Kevin, I know you mentioned a few things, but where can we find out more information about you, about the book, about where you're at?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you can find us everywhere. And if you're doing this already, you've probably found us somewhere or another. KevinEikenberry.com would be the main site. Certainly based on what we've talked about today, RemoteLeadershipInstitute.com. And as I mentioned earlier, RemoteLeadershipInstitute.com/pre-order. And if you pre-order the book and let us know that you did that, we've got some special content for you if you do that. And again, even if you're listening to this after the book comes out, there'll be an offer there. It may be a better one, it may be a different one, but there'll be something that will give you extra for having bought a copy of the book. So you can go and pre-order the book now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, sort of wherever you would think about pre-ordering a book, you can get them. So that's the best way to find out more.
Okay, great. Thank you. So everyone, we've listened and we've enjoyed hearing Kevin talk about remote leadership, the new book, what's coming out. And as with every episode, I now have to ask you now what, because we've had a great conversation. I've had fun. Hopefully Kevin has had fun. And we always know that we need to take that next step. We need to take action. We talked about getting better. So how are you going to get better? Are you going to think about the ways you communicate with your team? Do you have a blanket kind of communication strategy? And maybe you need to think about, hey, I know this person does better with this, and I know this person does better with this. And, at the end of the day, that's going to help us reach our goals a little bit faster. So now what? What kinds of things have you listened to that you can take action on immediately? Kevin even gave you a couple examples from the book looking at technology. So maybe you want to look at your technology. Maybe you want to think about how you're doing some of your team meetings. So Kevin, thank you very much for joining us today and taking time to share what you know and what's in your head. And everybody out there, thank you for taking the time to listen to us.
And I guess that's my cue to say you're welcome.
It is your cue.
And to say thank you to you, Lisa. And like I said, I can sense what's going to happen. More Lisa, less Kevin. But listen, let me close the way I close every week for you all, everybody. And we've mentioned it several times during the course of this episode about our Facebook group. We really do want to engage with you. There's that word, engage with you, to help you be a part of this to let us know what you like about what we're doing and what we could do better, and let us know who you'd like to have us interview in the future. You can do all that by going to our Facebook group and joining us there. It's at remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook. That's the easiest way to find it, remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook. So, Lisa, you thanked me. I'll thank you. And
thank you.
And mostly thank
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. And mostly to all of you out there, thanks for joining us. And I hope you'll come back another week for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.